Everyone was cheering for Son of Heaven, but before Son of Heaven could even lay a finger on the weapon, Dahl came in and snatched the blade. He was like this blinding streak of light that,
Sen, have you been to the Starlight Martial Hall before?
Sen was pulled from his dream by Susie as she interrupted Bobby's sixth retelling of Dollar stealing Son of Heaven's beast soul. Sitting in the back of Henry's aircraft with his two childhood friends, Sen was only interested in where Henry would be taking them, that he had completely zoned out. Next to him, Bobby let out an irritated scoff. Seriously, it was just about to get good. Sitting beside Sen, Susie let out a sigh.
Seriously? You barely let Sen say a word since he got on the ship. Why don't we hear from him for a bit?
Bobby looked at Sen and blushed. Well, he could have jumped in at any time, like, Sen, how's God's sanctuary been? Over the speakers from the front of the aircraft, Henry's voice rang, If you look outside to your right, you'll see our final destination. Curious to see where Henry was taking them, Sen ignored Susie and peered out the window. As the aircraft descended through the clouds, it immediately broke open to reveal a massive steel coliseum. On every side of the steel structure, there were holographs taller than the stadium, depicting the famous fighters who frequented that hall, showing off their martial arts or their beast souls. Welcome to Starlight Martial Hall, Henry said as he stepped out of the pilot's seat. Today, I'm taking you all to the most incredible fighting exhibition your little eyes have ever seen. Grateful for an excuse to avoid talking about the steel armor shelter, Sen chuckled as he stood up. I to take it that Thomas Silver is in town? Don't you mean the coolest fighter this galaxy has ever seen? Then yes, the Thomas Silver is in town to show off his martial arts style before the Chosen Ring. With a sigh, Bobby shook his head. Again with this Thomas Silver, he's not even an evolver. Why do you care about someone who hasn't even made it to the second level of God's sanctuary? Henry frowned. Hey, come on, Bobby. I thought you were on the Silver train. Like he's cool, but there's cooler fighters out there. Have you heard about Dahl? I was just telling Susie and Sen all about him. As they exited Henry's aircraft, the four friends were greeted by hundreds of clones of a handsome warrior, Thomas Silver. From gaudy posters to kitschy mugs to cheesy bobbleheads, Silver's face was plastered all across the stadium for the one-day event. There were young fans dressed from head to toe in silver monochrome to show their support for their favorite warrior. As Henry led them through the growing crowd of Silver fans, Sen could hear Susie laugh behind him.
I can't believe how popular Silver's gotten in just a few years. How many times has he won the Chosen Ring?
Dodging a woman selling silver merchandise, Bobby raised his voice. Not enough to call for this commotion. This all feels like a bit much, if you ask me. Henry rolled his eyes. Hey, I'm not going to stand any Thomas Silver slander today. Silver chooses to not evolve, because he doesn't want to advance until he completely masters the first level. Now, how can you be against a guy who is determined to fully explore the extent of his power? Should we go inside? Sen asked, fully knowing how long Henry's rants could go. I don't want to miss the opening. Henry huffed. Yeah, let's go in. The sooner we get to the match, the sooner I can prove to you all just how incredible Thomas Silver is. Eager to see the fight, Henry led the way as he handed each of his friends a ticket. After how expensive the doctor's office had been, Sen was thankful that he didn't need to spend more money. While Sen would love to have the money to pay for it alone, he appreciated that Henry didn't even ask to get him a ticket. As the four scanned their tickets, the four made their way through the main gates. Still having to wait for the group ahead of them, Susie whispered to Sen,
How's your family doing?
Sen shrugged. They're all right. Yara's just started school, but she's practically running the school herself. My mom has to constantly remind her that her job is to learn and not teach. Susie threw back her head and laughed, causing Sen to smile. Out of everyone in their friend group, Susie was by far the kindest, and after a week like this, he welcomed her warmth. Looking to make sure they weren't heard, Susie lowered her voice again.
And what about with your aunt and uncle? Henry told me. Were you able to pay them off?
The smile fell from Sen's lips. Not yet, but I've got a plan. Just need a little more time. As the four of them stepped into the stadium, they were all greeted by a massive stone pillar. As the tallest thing in the entrance, it was hard to avoid the stone structure. across its many sides, Sen could see names of warriors sketched into nearly every inch of the stone. Every year in God's sanctuary, the shelters opened their martial halls and hosted a melee to determine who is the strongest. From each level, the shelter put their best warrior forward to fight for the glory of the shelter. Those in the top 10 got their names inscribed into the sacred stele to memorialize the fighters for years to come. There's nothing I want more than to have my name alongside Thomas Silver's on the sacred stele. As they walked past, Henry let out a long sigh. Unfortunately, that's not in the cards for me. I've already been in God's sanctuary for 3 months and have nothing to show for it. Surprised to hear that, Sen shook his head. You haven't found any beast souls yet? I would have thought you would have bought one by now. I mean, I bought some primitive meat and a primitive beast soul, but I haven't been able to hunt anything myself. I can't even find someone to sell me mutant meat. It's just too rare. Bobby let out a chuckle. Wow, I guess there's just more luck in the steel armor shelter. I'm only a few months in, but I already have a mutant beast soul. With a raised brow, Henry looked at Bobby with a gaze of jealousy. How? You've only been in God's sanctuary a few weeks. Did you buy it? Of course not. I caught it myself. I'd be happy to teach you a thing or two. Despite the smug look on Bobby's face, Sen knew his cousin was lying. Since they were kids, Sen could always read Bobby like a book. Even if all the adults couldn't, Sen could always hear the change in Bobby's octave as he spewed out whatever lie he told. There was no way that Bobby actually found that beast soul himself. More likely, his parents were the ones who paid for it. Despite knowing the truth, Sen kept quiet. Mutant beast souls could easily sell for a few million on the market. If his family has money to pay for beast souls, they certainly don't need our home. In the distance, Sen could hear a horn bellow. The match was about to start. Eager to get inside, Henry started to run ahead. Hurry up! We can't miss a single minute of the match. Not wanting to miss it himself, Sen followed Henry into the stadium. Nearly every seat of the Coliseum was packed with screaming fans. With most of the stadium cheering for Thomas, Sen could see the shimmer of silver monochrome costumes throughout the stand. By the time they reached their seats, the announcer's voice bellowed throughout the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the moment that you all have been waiting for. The greatest lineup across the entire galaxy system. The entire stadium cheered. Thomas Silver! Thomas Silver! Even Bobby, who attempted to deny Thomas Silver's power, was joining in the chant. Thomas Silver! Thomas Silver! Hearing the champion of the hour's name throughout the stadium, the announcer went all in on their win. And the contestant that you've all been waiting for, Thomas Silver! As if to answer the screams of the audience, Thomas Silver sauntered into the arena with his broadsword drawn. Immediately, he looked to the audience and waved, causing the cheers to grow even louder. As they grew louder, Silver raised a hand to his ear and egged them on further. But Sen wasn't entirely sold on his introduction, just on Silver's initial appearance. Sen thought he was nothing more than a show pony who was mostly interested in looking versus actually fighting. However, that quickly changed as Silver's opponent came out. The announcer's voice cried out again. And facing off against our silver hero is a returning villain. Please give a warm welcome to Xanthar of the Crescent Crusaders. The moment the white-armored warrior stepped forward, he was greeted by a wall of boos. It seemed that the Crusaders didn't even have a single fan in the entire arena. With his puffed-up chest, Xanthar seemed to be almost encouraging their boos as he lifted his arms, telling them to bring it on.
Boo! You'll never beat Silver!
Susie shouted. Susie? Bobby laughed. I didn't realize you were a Silver fan. Susie offered Bobby a sheepish smile.
Maybe Henry's fandom is rubbing off on me a bit.
While they were focused on presenting it all, Sen kept a close eye on Thomas Silver's expression. Despite the overly cocky grin on Thomas's face, Sen could see hunger in his eyes. Not only was he confident in taking down his opponent, but he was itching for victory. Unlike his opponent, who seemed eager to pound on his opponent, Thomas was determined to win. Again, the announcer voice boomed over the entire stand. Gentlemen, take your starting positions. As both men turned to their starting positions, Xanthar the Crusader stomped his feet as he turned to the crowd. His opponent, however, kept their attention extremely fixated on the man before him. Not willing to give his opponent a single edge, Thomas was ready to take off charging out of the gate. "And match on begins!" the announcer cheered. As the horn blared, Silver sped for his opponent, his sword raised. Surprised by his opponent's emboldened charge, the Crusader summoned 2 flickering blue flame whips. The Crusader lashed the whips out at Silver, forcing Silver to push back and retreat from the long-range weapons. "Is that a Moonfire Salamander Beast Soul?" Bobby cried out as he scooted to the edge of his seat. "How is Silver going to get a close attack with a weapon like that?" Henry stirred in his seat. "I don't know, but he can't lose, right? I mean, he's never lost." "You don't have to worry about that. Silver's already won the fight," Sen said as he leaned back into his seat. With wide eyes, Henry looked at Sen. "How do you know that?" "He won at the moment his opponent stepped into the ring. He wants this more than anyone else in this entire stadium, even more badly than his biggest fan does. Like, look at that. He's allowing the Crusader to push him back." Curious, Henry turned his attention back to the fight. Again, Thomas charged, and again the blue flaming whips pushed him back. However, this time, as the Crusader cracked his whip, Thomas advanced just as the whip snapped in the air. Unable to retract the whip back in time, the Crusader couldn't pull up his whips in time before Thomas swiped at him with his sword. Thomas's sword bounced off the man's armor as he quickly retreated backward. Bobby let out a sigh. "You see that? Look how bad his aim is. If this was a match with Dollar, I know he would have sliced him right in half." While Sen couldn't disagree that Dollar would have probably ended the fight almost immediately, Sen knew Thomas could do the same, if he wanted to. Instead of slicing his opponent, Silver was only interested in drawing out the match. Despite his eagerness for victory, Silver still had fans that he couldn't disappoint. Before Sen could correct his cousin, he found Susie already jumping to Silver's honor.
"Just keep watching. He hasn't even done his signature move."
Surprised by Susie's familiarity, Henry snorted. "I didn't realize you knew Silver's signature move." Susie blushed.
"Not familiar, just, I'll go watch the fight."
Chuckling, Henry turned to Silver as the dashing warrior plunged at his opponent. This time, the Crusader was prepared and raised his whip to block Silver's attack. However, instead of attacking his opponent head-on, Silver quickly slipped around behind him. Bewildered, his opponent aimlessly tried to swipe at his assailant, but Silver was too fast. Now, behind the man, a massive black shadow crawled across Silver's skin, creating a hulking form before him. Before anyone knew it, a tremendous roar shook the stadium. Standing where Silver stood, a gigantic Tyrannosaurus Rex-type creature stood over the quivering Crusader. With its massive teeth, the creature opened its mouth and bared its teeth to the Crusader. Terrified, the Crusader crossed his arms above his head, signaling his surrender. Overhead, the announcer's voice rang through the stadium. "The Crusader surrenders! Thomas Silver is our champion!" The entire stadium cheered as the creature flashed its teeth to the crowd. As Thomas took in the applause, the creature picked up a boulder on the corner of the field and crushed it with its teeth, sending the crowd into an even bigger frenzy. With a sigh, Henry stared in wonder at the Tyrannosaurus Rex-like beast. "Man, I wish I had my own Rage Beast soul. Just imagine what kind of things I could do." Susie laughed.
"That would be pretty cool. You might actually become the next Thomas Silva."
Bobby snorted. "Sure, it's cool, but did you hear about the beast soul that Dollar stole? It's 3 times as big and strong enough to smash entire mountains." As his friends gushed over Silver's display, Sen couldn't pull his eyes from the Rage Beast. As Sen watched Silver in his Rage Beast form shatter a rock, it looked effortless, as if power came naturally to the man. "That's what I want," Sen thought as he watched Silver pick up another boulder. "I want to be strong enough that I can make it look effortless. I need to find the next creature that I'm going to hunt."